Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best AD carries right now for patch 6.14. So first up is going to be Jhin. Jhin has been seeing a lot of play recently in both solo queue and in the LCS. My opinion on the champion is that he's only good if you put the time into him and if you can play him correctly. Whenever I'm playing Jhin myself, or whenever there's one on my team or on the enemy team, I feel like they don't play him to his fullest potential. They either miss point blank W's or they don't hit very many ultimate shots when they do use his ultimate. So if you put the time into him, he's definitely a very strong pick, but because he's a lot harder to play than most of the other AD carries, he's not higher up on my list. He is pretty strong at all stages of the game though. He really doesn't have a weak point in the game. He's got very strong wave clear in his kit with his Q and his W. His cutting potential is also really nice in team fights. All he has to do is auto attack the enemy champion running at him, and then he can pop his W and he can kite them really nicely, especially if he does have a few crit items, because he is going to get that movement speed. His ultimate is a really strong ability if you can use it correctly. You can use it to start a fight by slowing the enemies, and that is probably the best way, or the way you want to use Jhin's ultimate most of the time. You don't want to be using it in the middle of a team fight. You want to use it more often than not to start a team fight, or to pick an enemy out, or just to finish off a low health target when the team fight is ending. He does have pretty surprising burst damage too. Whenever you are playing Jhin in the laning phase and you get your 4th shot up, then try to zone the enemy a little bit from CS, because you're probably going to end up winning that trade most of the time. And a few cons to Jhin are that he does not have a gap closer, and because he is pretty skill shot reliant, he is also a little bit harder to play. Next up, I have Caitlyn. So Caitlyn is one of the better overall AD carries. She really doesn't have a major weakness to her kit or in the game. She's got a great early game because she does have, I think, the longest base auto attack range for any AD carry in the game. So it just allows her to easily CS in the laning phase. And if she is going up against a shorter ranged AD carry, someone like a Sivir or a Vayne, then she can definitely do very well at poking them out and zoning them from CS. As long as you do go even with Caitlyn in the laning phase, or if you can even pick up a kill, then once you do get to that mid to late game, or especially once you get to late game as Caitlyn, you're going to be able to deal so much damage. I'm going to say that Caitlyn's late game is definitely one of the best for any AD carry, because if you have your headshot passive up and you also have a few crit items on Caitlyn, then you're going to be able to do a load of damage with your auto attacks. And if the enemies do end up stepping on your traps in team fights, then the amount of damage that you can pump out is pretty good. She also does a really good job at zoning enemies in team fights, and also at sieging down towers because of her traps. Just always remember to plant down your traps in team fights as Caitlyn, because although you may not think that the enemies will step on them, a lot of the time they do, because they don't really focus on your traps. They just focus on trying to get to their target, and a lot of the time I'll just plant down traps as Caitlyn and the enemy will end up stepping on them 2 or 3 times in a team fight, and it just allows you to get a load of damage off. A few cons to Caitlyn are that she does have a bit of a weaker mid game compared to some of the other AD carries like Jinx and Twitch, and I find that it's really hard to catch up with Caitlyn if you do fall behind with her. I feel like her damage is just super weak unless she does have her 3 or 4 core items, so just make sure that you do stay even in CS in the laning phase at least, because if you do end up dying for first blood, or if you die in the laning phase, then you're definitely going to be a lot weaker than some of the other AD carries who do have a good mid-game power spike. Next up is going to be Jinx. So unlike Caitlyn, Jinx does have one of the best mid games for any AD carry. Once she does finish Infinity Edge and Runanes, the damage spike that you get with just those 2 items is just absolutely insane. You can pump out so much just AoE damage in teamfights with Jinx because of the AoE damage coming out of her fish bones, and you can also stay pretty safe in teamfights because of the long range that your fish bones does provide you. She's got a pretty good crowd control kit as well. She does have the slow from her W and the snare with her E. Her ultimate is a really good tool for just finishing off that low health target, and it can also get a nice snowball going for you in the laning phase if you just pay attention to your top lane and your mid lane. If they do get the enemy champions low, then you can throw an ultimate over there when they are basing, and it could surprise you and you could pick up a kill some of the time. She's a really strong tower pushing AD carry too, because she does have the attack speed steroid with her Q. Her cleanup potential in teamfights is probably the best for any AD carry with her passive. And a few cons to her are that she does not have a gap closer, so you do have to be able to position with her decently in teamfights to be effective. And she's also semi-skill shot reliant with her W and her ultimate. Next up is Misfortune. So I want to call her the best teamfight AD carry in the game right now. When you are playing MF and you get like your 3 core items on her, if you can hit a good ultimate in a teamfight on a few targets, it's going to deal so much damage, and that could just end up single-handedly winning you the team fight. So as long as you can position like decently as MF, just stay in the back line and look for that opportunity to get an AoE ult off, then you can do really well on her. She's got a really good level 6 all-in potential as well. If you are playing with a support like a Leona or a Sona, who are very meta support picks right now, I think that Sona is like one of the best supports this patch, as well as Leona. So if your support does lock one of those 2 champions, then definitely look to pick up MF and look to go for an all-in at level 6, because if the Sona can land her ultimate or if the Leona can land her ultimate, then MF is going to be able to get a fully channeled ultimate off. She's got pretty good poke in the laning phase too with her Q. What you want to try to do as MF is bounce your Q off of a low health minion and get the kill on the minion and bounce that off to the enemy AD carry, because most of the time if you can do this, it'll chunk them to around half HP or sometimes even below half HP, which is pretty insane. She's got pretty good zoning potential as well in teamfights with the slow on her E. And a few cons to MF are that she is pretty weak if she does fall behind, and she also does not have a gap closer. And to round out the top 5 for this patch, I have Ashe. So it's about time that Ashe has finally started to see some rise like in popularity and rise in strength these past few patches. I've been like promoting Ashe pretty much this whole season, and I've been playing her as one of my go-to AD carries, but it's only been like these past few patches now that like pro players are starting to pick up on her, and she's starting to see a rise in solo queue as well. The main reason why Ashe is just such a strong pick is because of her ultimate. Whether you're in the laning phase as Ashe or whether you're in a mid to late game team fight, that one pick on the enemy squishy target could end up like snowballing the game out of control if it is in the laning phase, or could end up winning your team the game if it is in a mid to late game team fight. She's a really strong kiting champion too. Her Q just allows her to kite really nicely in team fights because she's going to be able to proc that passive like really quickly, and she's also a pretty good tank shredder champion. Her Q allows her to kite those tanks nicely, and it also will deal a lot of damage. So when you are playing Ashe, just make sure that you are like using your Q whenever it is active in team fights. I find that I'll sometimes forget to activate my Q if I've like already activated it once, because once it does run out after you've activated it the first time, you'll sometimes forget to activate it like another time once you do get 4 more auto attacks off. So just always be spamming that Q in teamfights because it's going to allow you to deal so much damage with Ashe. She does have great crowd control in her kit too. Her E is like her only ability that does not provide her any crowd control, so that's just really strong, especially for an AD carry. A lot of the other AD carries like don't even have one crowd control ability, so because of that, it makes Ashe a great pick as well. She's also a longer ranged AD carry, so this allows her to do really well in the laning phase against those shorter AD carries like Sivir and Vayne. And one con to Ashe is that she does not have a gap closer, so you do need to be able to kite with her in team fights and position well in order to be the most successful on the champion. So first up on the honorable mentions, I have Sivir. So I think that Sivir is still a pretty solid pick, but when playing her recently, I just feel like she lacks the carry potential that some of the champions on my top 5 do. If you go even with Sivir or if you fall behind, I feel like her damage is just a lot weaker than someone like an Ashe or a Misfortune. Your damage only really starts to pick up with her once you do get like 3 or 4 items and once you can start team fighting, because where her damage is most like relevant and where you can notice it the most is when you do get those W bounces off in team fights. So I do still think she is a great pick. Her ultimate provides great utility as well for her team, but I feel like she does lack the carry potential of some of the other AD carries. Next up is going to be Twitch. So unlike Sivir, Twitch does provide like really good solo carry potential. Once you do get like your core items of Youmuu's and Runane's on Twitch, then you can start doing really well in team fights. His late game is probably one of the best for any AD carry as well. A nice like positioned ultimate in a team fight with Twitch can absolutely melt squishy targets, and it can also just end up winning your team that fight. So as long as you can like just stealth with Twitch before a team fight starts and then just get in that good position to unload with your ultimate, then you can do really well with him. And to round out the honorable mentions, I have Kog'Maw. So in my opinion, Kog'Maw is one of the best AD carries if you can pair him up with a support that does synergize well with him. If you can pair him up with a Lulu or a Janna or even a Leona, then you can do really well with Kog'Maw, because the amount of damage he can do in mid to late game team fights is really good. But his main weakness is that he does not have a gap closer, and it's really easy to get caught out with him. So if you are looking for a good duo combo to carry solo queue right now, or I guess to carry dynamic queue, then I would recommend playing like Kog'Maw Lulu, Kog'Maw Janna, because you can do really well if you do get to the mid to late game with those combos. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you guys have not already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.